Looking to buy, sell, or grow your business to position it for a sale? As the owner and managing partner of Sun Acquisitions, Dominic Rinaldi has personally been involved in over 300 M&A transactions. He has seen and done it all, consulting with large and small businesses across a broad range of industries. On M&A Unplugged, he'll interview buyers, sellers, and their advisors about their experiences scaling, selling, and acquiring businesses. On every episode, you will get key learnings, but most importantly, you will be better prepared for your own acquisition or sale. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Dominic Rinaldi.
I am so pleased to welcome Tom Minichiello to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Tom is a seasoned financial executive and has held several senior financial positions with many firms across a broad range of industries. Tom is currently the Senior Vice President, CFO, Treasurer, and Secretary of Westell. Boy, Tom, that's a mouthful, which is a leading provider of high-performance wireless network infrastructure solutions. Tom is also a prolific marathoner and a fellow Yankees fan. Tom, I couldn't believe when I read your profile that you've completed a marathon in every state, so 50 marathons, and every single one of them was under 4 minutes. I mean, that is unbelievable. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And just for the record, under 4 hours.
Oh, did I say 4 minutes?
You almost had me in the Guinness Book of World Records. But
as you can tell, I'm not a marathoner.
That's okay. But thank you for the kind introduction.
God, Tom, that takes incredible focus and stamina. And I can't even imagine, in what time period did you complete all of those marathons? How many years did it take?
Well, I did most of them, believe it or not, and I can send you the article from the paper that kind of does a nice job of summarizing it. Daily Herald article that was done back in January 2014, which is when I finished it. But I did most of them in the late 2011, 2012, 2013 timeframe.
Wow.
Like 44 of them, and I had done 6 prior to that kind of 2.5 year period. So I just decided I was in my early to mid 50s. It's now or never. It was actually harder just scheduling them and doing all the travel and all that than it was actually running them. I mean, once you're in good shape, you're doing them. So I was on a mission to get it done.
What an amazing feat. That's incredible. Any sense for how many people actually have done that? I mean, that seems to be a very high bar.
Yes. So there are 3 groups that I know of. There's a 50-state marathon group, a 50-state plus DC marathon group, and then there's a 50 sub-4 marathon group. So I was in all 3. I don't know how many there are. There probably are over 1,000 or somewhere in that range that have done all 50 states, but there's just over 100 in the 50 sub-4 completion group. Because a lot of people do them, but they're not shooting for any kind of time or just want to finish them. I took it one step further and decided to do them within a certain prescribed time, and under 4 that's kind of where the bar is set by this informal club that somebody from Glen Ellen, Illinois here started. He lives in Texas now, but it's a great group of people with obviously a common bond.
Well, the show is not about marathons, but boy, I just find that so interesting. I could go on and on, but let's move to the topic at hand, which is mergers and acquisitions. And let's start with your career. So you've spent your entire career in finance. Looks like you picked that lane very early on. I'm just curious, why finance?
Well, I realized I had a knack for it. Actually, back when I was at college, we moved off campus, and for some reason, there was 8 of us. We were looking for an off-campus house to rent, and I, for some reason, was the only one with any wherewithal to go talk to the landlady and figure out the rent and divide up the bills and make sure everybody was paying their fair share every month. And so I kind of said, all right, I kind of like doing this. It was, handling all the finances, and that just led me to a professional career in accounting and finance. And I love what I do. I couldn't think of doing anything else, actually.
Wow. Well, it sounds like those early traits are certainly paying off now. Let's go to you. When you and I first met, you had mentioned to me that you've been involved in any number of M&A transactions, buy side and sell side. And I'm curious, starting at a very high level, looking back now in the rearview mirror, are there some common themes, common threads that you've seen in those transactions that you've been able to take from one deal to the next? And what are those?
Yes, certainly. So I first got a taste of it as an auditor for my first job out of school was with a large pharmaceutical and consumer products company. And we were doing an asset deal, and I got on the project and I got assigned the inventory. We were actually buying the assets selectively. So it really mattered to value the inventory correct. So I had to fly all over the country to the different warehouses, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the project-based nature of it, and that got me started in it. And it's been a common thread through all of my roles in different companies. And it's been mostly due diligence work. I mean, lately I've been involved on the whole, start to finish targets all the way to, finishing the deal. But I would say the common thread is the level of diligence. It really, in my book, is really important to not cut any corners. Don't rush through it. Be thorough. In most cases, it's a big chunk of money that the company is going to invest in an acquisition. So it's just like if you were making the biggest purchase of your life, like buying a house, you certainly do a thorough inspection.
Yeah, and to the M&A Unplugged podcast community, you've really been involved mostly, if not exclusively, in publicly traded transactions, correct?
So I've been working for my entire career. That's correct, for publicly traded companies. Now, the transactions haven't always been of other publicly traded companies. In fact, if I counted them by number of deals that I've been involved in, or would-be deals, because sometimes they don't always come to a deal, we probably purchased more private companies and family-owned companies and entrepreneurial companies and startups even in our business, because we're in technology. So the targets have not always been, in fact, more often than not, have not been public companies. But I have been involved in larger deals and that have involved other public companies as well.
Well, our community is going to be really interested in the private transactions that you've done. So you mentioned mostly family-run businesses, smaller businesses. Were these add-ons to the businesses that you were running? Were there vertical integrations in there? What was the nature of some of those transactions?
You just hit upon two of them. They were vertical integration, in some cases family. I recall one fairly recently. It was 3 engineering individuals who had worked in large public companies, had good skills. They found themselves without jobs and started a company, and they developed some interesting technology that turned out to be something that we were looking for to fill in a little bit of the white space in our own product portfolio. And so that's an example of not family, just a group of individuals who got together and started their own company and did a pretty good job of building it to a certain point, but then they really need to get to that next level. They really need to sell their company to an established name that can get them greater reach in the markets.
So you talked about diligence and the importance of diligence, and we talk about that all the time when we talk to our buy-side clients, but also our sell-side clients in preparation for getting out into the market in the deal and making sure that their house is in order. So what have you learned over the years and over the many deals that you've done about diligence? What are the best practices that you've brought to the table in regards to diligence?
Well, I think you have to first realize that the employees of the company, whether it's the law department, the finance department, the engineering and marketing departments, everybody has a day job. So when you go into diligence, you've got to make sure that you've got a team that has the time and the bandwidth to do the proper job. And if you don't, I would strongly suggest hiring outside companies to do that for you or do that in conjunction with you. And so, of course, you can't not be involved. It's you're the company acquiring the other company, but you got to make sure you have the right bandwidth, and then you've got to really make sure you've got all the areas covered and you do a pretty thorough job.
So getting down into the weeds just a little bit, are there particular things in the process of due diligence where you pay special attention to? You mentioned inventory, and interestingly enough, I had Tad Render, who is the principal at Miller Cooper, a local accounting firm, on a little bit ago, and he talked about the fact that inventory is an issue in 9 out of 10 deals, which shocked me. I knew it was an issue because we deal with it all the time, but I had no idea to that level and that extent. So curious, if there are aspects of diligence like inventory, what those might be, and what do you do to prepare for those?
Sure. Well, I would agree. In my experience, in not every single case, but in almost every case, inventory, these are companies that have inventory, just so that's not a service company, and these are product companies. And I'd agree. In fact, I can't think of one where it wasn't an issue in my experience. And it's a multitude of reasons. If you're buying a smaller family-run company, they probably didn't keep inventory records sometimes at all. They would buy things as needed. There would be inventory physically present in the warehouse, but there'd be no system around it for, withdrawing and adding, and, like you would normally have in a company where you add receipts into the books, and when you issue material, it's booked, it's recorded. In some cases, no transactions. So, and they've never counted it. They just take it like it's, a coffee mug out of your cupboard, right? So you come in and it's, oh my God. So it becomes a centerpiece of a problem. So you've got to do a physical, you have to reinvent their inventory accounting from a certain historical point in time and roll it forward in order to understand what you have, because it impacts the earnings and the gross margin and all that, right?
Yeah, it makes total sense. So in your role as a CFO and on the finance side, how do you approach and how do you present a target acquisition to the CEO and the board from a return on investment perspective? Do you have a model or methodology that you follow? And the reason I ask this question is I talk to clients all the time on the buy side about understand what your target return should be and how you're going to measure it, and then measure it. And so curious how you approach that.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of ways to start in response to that, Dominic. I mean, first of all, there better be a strategy for the company and for the business, a growth strategy. And that strategy is typically, there's 2 ways to grow, right? You could either, in our business, you can internally develop products and technology for market, or you can go out and acquire them. In both cases, you're going to have to do a very similar return on investment analysis. And in the case of buying or acquiring, those can happen quicker, but they're also a larger initial layout, and they're much more riskier as opposed to the internal, which is going to take longer, probably won't cost as much, but it'll take longer. It's a little safer. But in either case, in our business, when you're in technology, a lot of things don't pan out because of technological change, market shifts, market cycles, things like that. So when you put it all together and you decide you want to buy instead of internally develop, we do a typical discounted cash flow with an ROI analysis. And in the case of acquisitions, I look for, it's got to be north of 20 to 25% return. In fact, I get nervous when it's at that amount because things happen. And so, so we look for that. That's the minimum. If it's not doing that, then you need to retool the offer price, or maybe look at the projections and do something there and adjust it. But if it isn't going to work, there's no sense starting a due diligence effort in a process because it's time consuming and expensive, and who wants to waste time and money, right?
Yeah. So Tom, just to put some clarity around that. So the benchmark of 20 to 25 is your floor. Are you looking at that on a cash on cash basis? So how much money was invested into the business and how much is it spitting back on an annual basis? Is that the basic calculation, or do you do a more detailed calculation than that?
No, that's pretty much the essence of the calculation.
So for the M&A Unplugged community out there, if you don't understand this measurement tool, simply if you look at how much money you put into a deal or ancillary dollars that go into a deal, so it's not just your equity infusion, it might be third parties that you brought in to help analyze the deal. If you had to take an internal resource and dedicate them to getting the deal done, you've got all these sunk costs to go do the deal. You need to factor all of that in and then look at what your annual profit is on that business and divide that, and that should give you your return. And a 20-25% is pretty common measurement that we hear of, Tom, and on the low end. So I think that fits with a lot of the things that we hear from other folks.
Yeah, that's good to hear. One thing I would also add on this topic is, in my experience, and we're in telecom technology. We make equipment, but it's based on a certain type of technological feature in the product or features. And typically, when you go to the target, if they have been thinking about selling or they're set up to sell, or they've been thinking about selling and they haven't done anything to set themselves up, which is a whole different problem. But typically what'll happen is they in recent periods leading up to the time you engage, they have probably already begun the process of underfunding their development and underfunding some of their marketing and things like that. So what you really have to be cognizant of, and this comes with experience, is you're going to pay a certain amount and you're going to have transaction costs and things like that, like you just said, you got to consider everything. But you've got to also consider, if you've got to bring the R&D funding back up to a certain level in order to make it successful, that's got to go in the model.
Boy, you just brought up such a key point for the M&A Unplugged podcast community. What Tom is really talking about here is, a company goes out to market, and obviously the company and the bankers want to present that business in the best light. And it's so important to make sure that they haven't pared back on key fundamental areas of the business and sort of starve the business, so that when you take over, you're taking over a business that might stagnate. So you really have to pay attention to that, because there's sometimes some window dressing that goes on with a business that's been taken out to the market. I mean, you need to make sure that the foundation is solid and there for growth. And if not, if you have to make further investments, you need to incorporate that into your model. So, Tom, I think that's a great piece of information. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked earlier about deals that you walked away from. I think you can learn more, if not as much, more from the deals that you walk away from. What lessons can you share about your experience walking away from deals?
Well, I think, the old saying, right? Sometimes the best deal you do is the one you don't do. The worst thing I think you can do is overpay for an acquisition. I think doing no acquisition and being left with just your initial dilemma of how do I grow my business is, while, maybe square one, back to the drawing board, that's better than all of a sudden having on your hands, something that you paid too much for, and you've got a boatload of other problems that, in my view, are typically, worse. So, sometimes you do overpay a little bit in a lot of cases, but you've got to be real careful of that. So I've been involved in several where we did as much diligence as the seller would allow before we went into LOI and into diligence. And then once we got into diligence, we, found, that's why you do diligence, right? We found things that we didn't know we were going to find, and when we put it all together, we didn't like the deal, either the structure of the deal or the amount that we were paying. And in most cases, when you go back to then renegotiate, at least in my experience, the other party is not open to renegotiating what was in the LOI, and so you walk. I mean, you've got to stick to your criteria. You've got to stick to your strategy. You've got to stick to your financial model as a business, and so you've got to be willing to do that. Some people find it hard to do, but the negative consequences of not doing that to me are too bad. They're just not good. So, and we've done that.
So, Tom, you have to have a lot of discipline as a management team to do that. And I imagine as the CFO, you more often than not are in a position where you're having to be the voice of reason when it comes to that sort of stuff. And the marketing team is probably really excited about the potential of, bringing on this, added service or product. How do you manage that internally effectively and get the management team to really coalesce around that concept that you don't want to overpay, you don't want to make a big mistake?
Well, in good companies, when you are in the middle of these projects, people are going to listen to everybody. So there's a team, and certainly if the returns aren't working, if the model isn't working, if we're finding things in diligence that are negative, that are hampering what we're trying to do here under the current structure and value, folks are going to listen to the CFO who says, look, the way it's put together right now, it's not going to work for us. You're right. There is an element of management, whether it's the CEO or the sales and marketing people or the engineering people who, may not agree. They figure they can fix these things, or, we just want to do the deal because, we got to do it. That's part of your life as a CFO. You've got to deal and manage with it. That's part of managing the team. And, in public companies, we have a board of directors as well. That's on any acquisition that you do would be involved in the entire situation. And so, they're going to definitely listen to what the CFO has to say. So, I find if you manage it properly, you've got a good rapport with the team. You've got the board doing their oversight work. Smart people usually come to the right answers.
And you've got the model, right? So at the end of the day, you've got the financials and the model, and that usually can hold the day, right? Unless there's some other compelling reason to go do the deal.
Right. Now, I will say I do, having just sort of chatted with you about this topic, I do recall one where we did successfully redo a deal, a small one, with a family company. And, so it's not like it can't happen. It does happen if the other party is, it all gets back to motivations and willingness and where people are at with their company, with their life. And so there's a lot of factors, as you probably know, that can work for you. And so the more, you know each other as buyer and seller, I think chances of getting a deal done, if everyone's motivated the right way, goes up.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? If everybody's motivated, right? If you've got motivated parties, you usually can find a way through the bumps in the road and get a deal done.
Correct. Yes. And obviously, it always gets down to the money, but there's other things too. There's relationships. There's other factors, but no question, the money is the centerpiece.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Tom, how has M&A work? Doing transactions. Early on, you were on the audit side, and now you're really driving the bus on a lot of the stuff that you're looking at from an M&A perspective. How has that made you a better CFO in performing your role day in and day out for the company?
I will say this, especially here in my current role, but in everything I've done, it's not the only answer. You don't have to grow by acquisition. And in fact, in technology, and there was the co-founder of Microsoft, Paul Allen, who recently passed away, but I'll never forget his interview on TV a few years back, because he made all those investments and acquisitions, and none of them worked after Microsoft. So, most things in technology do not pan out. So, what I've learned is, look, you can do things internally. If you've got good engineers, you've got a good team, you've got people who can build things and develop product and write software code. It's M&A is not the only answer. And in a lot of cases, I think, you need to step back and look at that and say, look, you can do this, make buy. You can do the make side of this thing perhaps better than anything out there that you might think you could acquire.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It should be one leg of the strategy, right? Or maybe always be looking for good deals, but it shouldn't maybe be the only thing that you're doing, right? You got to be testing all sorts of things.
Right. Yeah.
Currently looking at doing transactions? Are you actively in the market for add-ons?
Well, we've disclosed in our earnings calls to our investors. We do them quarterly like most public companies, so it's not going to tell you anything here that we haven't said on those calls. And what we've done here is we spent a fair amount of time, I would say during the last summer, fall, and into the early part of the winter this past year, looking at deals, getting involved into diligence. We have not closed any of them for a variety of reasons, some of which we just discussed. And so we have, in fact, turned more of our focus and attention into internal product development for growth. And, we've outlined the areas and the markets we think are good investments in. It's fiber access, it's public safety, it's something called CBRS. It's the Citizens Broadband Radio Service. We're getting into the weeds now, but it's a new spectrum for cellular that companies and enterprises can actually purchase directly. It's not a market yet, but it's coming. It's something that came out of the U.S. Navy. So these are future markets that we think we can build products for. Now, having said that, we will certainly entertain and not turn our backs on anything that we have been involved in recently that's either stalled or went away. Sometimes they come back, or anything new that comes up. I mean, we're always open. I mean, our job is to drive the value, right? And so we're doing it both ways. But I would say we went from majority focus on M&A for about 8 to 10 months to now more focus on internal development in the last quarter or two.
So I'm curious, this CBRS. Do you know enough about this technology that you could talk about, like how that might change cellular and wireless calling?
Absolutely, yes. So what it is it's spectrum. So just like 4G, 3G, 5G is coming, it's spectrum, but it's going to be deployed differently. So this was a separate spectrum that it's almost like the internet. It's something the government had for years. It was only used by the U.S. Navy for wireless communications, and it's very underutilized. And so this is now going to be made available to the public, to basically anybody. I mean, you and I could buy a swath of this spectrum if we so choose to do, and set up a cellular network in your house, just like you have a Wi-Fi network. So, and the reason why it's important is it's cellular. So a lot of people probably don't understand the difference between cellular and Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is created for transmitting data, for internet and things like that. But it's terrible for phone calls. It's not good for texting. It's unsecured. It's unlicensed. It's best effort. And so cellular is much stronger. It's a more solid foundational protocol to transmit wirelessly. So this CBRS has been now branded as something called OnGo, O-N, capital G-O, because it's an alliance. You can go to the website, cbrsalliance.org. You can learn all about it. And so now it's called OnGo, and essentially companies, manufacturing companies, hospitals, resorts, businesses, offices can deploy their own cellular network, just like you have a Wi-Fi network, but it's got all the security and the and all of the other things that Wi-Fi lacks. And so you can rely on it a lot better. So if you're a manufacturing plant and you've got all your operations, everything from keeping the books to building the product to taking incoming receipts to doing payroll. You can go buy a swath of the spectrum and have your own wireless network.
So interesting. So it's not something that's going to compete with 5G, which is all we've been hearing about for a couple of years. It sounds like it's going to sit aside 5G and really has a tremendous private application to it.
That's exactly what it is. It's for private cellular networks. Now, I don't think it'll replace Wi-Fi because Wi-Fi is evolving too, but it'll be very similar. So, in 2 or 3 years, you've got a phone, you've got a Wi-Fi chip in there and a cellular chip for 5G. You may have a CBRS chip in there so that when you walk into the hospital and you can't find the nurse or the doctor for the patient you're visiting, you can hop on their CBRS network, just like you would hop on their Wi-Fi network, and probably find where the doctor is or where whatever you need is. So
no hiding. There's no hiding anymore.
No hiding, and you'll find it with a lot more precision than you would under Wi-Fi. So that's what it is.
That's awesome. And so this is something that Westell is on the leading edge of bringing to the market?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we are. We're building what's called a small cell, and all a small cell is it's when you look at a cell site or a cell tower, a small cell is all of that in a little box, like, maybe a little bit bigger than a shoebox. That's what and these small cells are, they use them for 4G and 5G, 4G today, not yet 5G, but we're building a small cell for CBRS so that these things will go up in buildings and wherever, manufacturing plants, wherever the customers who want to buy the network, they'll need the equipment to make it all work. So that's what we do. We sell we're an equipment supplier. So we are building something for that market.
That's tremendous. Tom, it's been great to have you. I love, maybe we could put a bow on this. If you were to, bring it up to the 50,000 foot level and offer advice to other CFOs out there who haven't done transactions yet or haven't done that many, or to just, anybody looking to do an acquisition, what advice overall would you have for them as they go down the path?
Well, for CFOs, be the captain of the project and, be at the forefront. The CFOs have a great perspective because you know your business. You obviously know the financials, deals, payback and ROI and all that. Be at the forefront and make sure you don't skip on diligence and be thorough in all areas. I mean, so it's your job to make sure that you're diligent on the diligence, not just in your area, but across the board, product, technology, legal, especially, all of that. So that's my advice is these are serious moves. These are usually moves that can, in a lot of cases, can make or break a business or a company or an organization. So just be at the forefront, make sure they're done right, be expressive when, you see things aren't right and speak up.
That's awesome. Last question. Asking all of my guests this, is there any book in particular, it doesn't have to be a business book, but if it is great, any book in particular that has really left a lasting impression on you and why?
Well, that's a good question. I do have time between family, working out, and work to do
and your marathons.
read books. Well, I just read a book recently. My favorite book is The Hard Things About Hard Things, which is Ben Horowitz. He founded Netscape Navigator in the 90s. I remember they got shoved aside by Microsoft, but the book is fantastic. It's called The Hard Things About Hard Things. It's just really good.
I have never read it. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good book. But I just read Jay Wright, so I'm pretty passionate about not just the Yankees, but about my Villanova college basketball team. And so he just came out with a book called Attitude. And so the thing that just sticks out to me there is there's a lot of things you can't control in life, but your attitude is probably the most important thing that you totally control. So, if you go to Villanova and you go to the practice facility, it's called the Davis Center, and you walk in there, get in there. I mean, you can't just walk anywhere, but you can walk around. You'll see attitude posted everywhere. And, it's all about attitude and the next play. Can't change the past. So these are the kinds of themes that are throughout his book The book is called Attitude, and I just loved it. It was a great book.
Written like a true NCAA head basketball coach. Right?
Well, I listened to his podcast too. They got a pretty good podcast. So I'm pretty religious about listening to everything about Villanova hoops. So, but good book.
Yeah. Tom, thank you so much for being on today. It's been a pleasure having you as a guest. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, Dominic, thank you for having me. My pleasure, and delightful talking with you.
So for the M&A Unplugged podcast community, just to summarize a few of the key things that Tom brought up, it's so important as you're contemplating diligence that you look at whether or not you have the right team in place to handle the diligence and the integration that's going to occur post-transaction. And if you don't have the proper resources to line up external resources, because most companies are running at pretty full efficiency these days, and to take somebody who's got a full-time job and ask them to layer on diligence and integration could be pushing somebody over the edge. So important for a clean transaction to make sure that you have the proper resources. Tom also mentioned strategy. We've talked about this a couple of other times in earlier podcasts. You should be setting the course and the strategy from day one. Know what you want to achieve, what you want to do with an acquisition, so that when you go out into the marketplace and start looking at opportunities, it's against a set acquisition strategy that you've put in place and the whole management team has agreed to. Tom also mentioned that when you analyze a deal, it's so important to also think about if any additional investments need to be made to bring that acquisition up to the point where you can, not only keep the ship steady, but also take it to the next level. And then the last thing, the message for CFOs was to be the captain of the transaction, really quarterback the deal from all aspects, because you're at the end of the day going to have to present to the management team and the board, the financial justification, and not being the captain of that deal could put the whole deal in jeopardy. Hope you enjoyed today's show. All the information will be available in the show notes. If you would like to learn more about the process of acquiring or selling a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com, or feel free to reach out to me at drinaldi@sunacquisitions.com. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.
Thank you for joining us today on M&A Unplugged. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and recommend it wherever you get your podcasts. If you want more great information on how to scale, acquire, or sell a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com.